The story of the fight that opened my eyes forever. It started like any ordinary day. The sun was rising slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I had walked to the park as I usually did, feeling the crisp morning air fill my lungs with a sense of calm and purpose, but today there was an unusual tension in the air, as if the world was holding its breath. I noticed a small crowd gathering near the old oak tree, and curiosity drew me closer. I could see two figures standing face to face, their bodies tense, their eyes locked on each other. I did not know them, but the atmosphere felt heavy and electric, and before I could turn away, the first blow landed, and it echoed like a thunderclap over the quiet park. The sound startled birds into flight and sent shivers down my spine. I froze for a moment, unsure whether to step back or intervene, but something inside me urged me to stay and watch the struggle unfold. The fight was not graceful, it was raw and messy. Every movement was fueled by anger, fear, and desperation. The ground shook under the impact of their steps, and the grunts and yells mingled with the sound of rustling leaves and distant traffic. I saw a flash of something in the eyes of the fighters, pain and regret, perhaps a memory or a secret I could not see, but I sensed it there, as if their souls were speaking through their fists. I noticed a young man standing at the edge of the crowd, his hands trembling. He seemed paralyzed yet unwilling to leave. He reminded me of myself in moments when courage felt like an impossible task. As the fight continued, I saw a shift in their movements. One of them faltered and stumbled backward, the other hesitated for a split second, and that moment held more meaning than all the punches and kicks combined. It was as if time slowed down, and I could feel every heartbeat, every drop of sweat, and every breath of fear and hope mingling in the air. I realized then that the fight was not just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, a battle of inner demons that had spilled into the open, and I felt an unexpected connection to both of them. I felt their pain, their anger, their longing for understanding and release, and in that instant I understood that life was not about avoiding fights but about facing them, learning from them, and letting them reveal truths that we could not see otherwise. The fight ended not with a winner but with exhaustion. Two men breathing heavily, covered in scratches, bruises, and sweat. They looked at each other, and for the first time there was no anger, just an understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the shared humanity. And in that moment I felt my own eyes opening to the complexity of human experience, to the fragility and strength that coexist in every person. I had witnessed a transformation, a revelation hidden inside a struggle I had never expected to see. The young man at the edge of the crowd stepped forward slowly, his eyes no longer fearful but curious and reflective, and I realized that each of us carries fights inside us, visible and invisible, that shape who we are and who we become. I left the park that day with a strange mixture of awe and clarity. The ordinary world around me seemed different, the colors brighter, the sounds sharper, the air richer with possibility. I walked home thinking about courage and vulnerability, and how often we mistake the fight outside for the fight inside, yet sometimes the outside fight mirrors the battles we refuse to acknowledge within us. And I knew I would never forget the sight, the sound, and the feeling of that morning, the way the earth had held them, the way the crowd had watched silently, the way my heart had opened in response. I carried the lesson with me like a small seed of understanding that would grow slowly over the years. I would think of it when faced with conflict, when anger rose, when fear threatened to paralyze me, and I would remember the faces, the sweat, the breaths, the hesitation, and the realization that in every struggle there is a story, and in every story there is a truth waiting to be seen. I walked past the familiar streets and noticed people I had seen 100 times, yet today they seemed different. Each smile, each frown, each hurried step told a story I had never taken the time to notice before. I understood that the fight was a mirror of life itself, unpredictable, chaotic, sometimes painful, yet always meaningful, and I felt an awakening inside me, like a door opening to a room I did not know existed. I realized then that I could not unsee what I had seen, and I would never want to. The images of struggle and revelation were etched into my memory, and with them came a quiet understanding that life demands attention, courage, empathy, and the willingness to face not just the world but ourselves fully and honestly. I returned home. The sunlight filtering through the windows seemed softer, warmer, and I felt a calm that was unfamiliar yet welcome. I thought about my own fears, the battles I avoided, the truths I ignored, and I knew that change would not come from hardening these struggles but from embracing them, learning from them, and letting them teach me what it meant to live with awareness and compassion. I took a deep breath and let the stillness fill me. The memory of the fight replayed in my mind like a lesson, unfolding slowly, layer by layer. I understood that pain can be beautiful, that conflict can reveal truth, that witnessing can transform, and I knew that I would never approach life the same way again. And how it lingered in my mind long after I had left the park. I found myself thinking about the two men and the energy that had radiated from them. It was a mix of anger, sorrow, hope, and unspoken understanding that seemed to seep into my own being. I began to notice fights everywhere, not just the physical ones but the emotional battles that people carried silently. I saw a woman in the cafe arguing with herself over a decision she could not make, her hands twisting nervously in her lap, her eyes flicking between the menu and some invisible horizon. I saw a young boy on the street struggling to carry a bag that seemed too heavy for him, and I recognized the fight between pride and humility in his posture. The old man sitting on the bench with his head bowed was waging a quiet battle with regret and loneliness, and I realized that life itself was a series of fights, some we see and some we carry alone, hidden from the world but just as significant. I remembered the young man at the edge of the crowd, his face etched with reflection, and I thought about how witnessing a fight can awaken awareness in ways that we do not anticipate, how empathy can emerge from observing pain, how understanding can be sparked by seeing struggle unfold. I walked through the streets, letting my mind wander through the lessons the fight had taught me. Each step felt deliberate, as if the ground beneath me was guiding me through a new perception of existence. I remembered the sound of the blows, the echo in the park, the way the air had vibrated with tension and release, and I realized that those moments were not just a spectacle, they were a message, a revelation about courage, resilience, and the fragile yet unyielding spirit of humanity. I began to see connections in everything. The fluttering of a bird outside my window was a reminder of freedom, the raindrops on the pavement mirrored the persistence of life, the laughter of children in the distance spoke of innocence and hope, and I understood that even in chaos there is a rhythm and in conflict there is meaning. I started to reflect on my own battles, the times I had chosen silence over confrontation, the moments I had suppressed anger or fear, the occasions I had avoided facing truth, and I felt a surge of resolve that perhaps true courage was not in never fighting but in knowing when to face the fight and how to learn from it, how to let it transform rather than destroy. I remembered the faces of the men, the exhaustion etched in their features, the fleeting moment of recognition and empathy that passed between them, and I felt a strange warmth in my chest, the warmth of understanding that human connection can emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, that even in conflict there is potential for insight and growth. I carried that thought with me into my daily life, noticing subtleties I had never paid attention to before, the quiet struggle of a friend keeping a secret, the internal tension of a colleague balancing ambition and ethics, the silent grief of someone passing by. All these fights were reflections of the one I had witnessed, and each held lessons waiting to be discovered. I found myself writing in a notebook, capturing these observations in a stream of consciousness, letting the words flow without restraint. The fight had opened a door inside me, and I wanted to explore every room. I wanted to understand every shadow, every hidden corner of the human experience. I reflected on forgiveness, the possibility of releasing anger without losing clarity, the strength in vulnerability, the power in empathy, and I began to see that the fight in the park was not an isolated event but a symbol of the continual challenges we face in life, and how every challenge is an opportunity for awakening and growth. I started reaching out more, noticing the unspoken struggles of those around me, offering support and listening without judgment. I realized that awareness without action was incomplete, and that compassion required engagement, not just observation. I remembered the trembling young man who had stood at the edge of the crowd and thought about how witnessing a fight can catalyze change, not just in those involved but in those who observe with openness and honesty. I felt my own fears soften, the rigidity of my past judgments dissolve, and a new clarity emerge. The world seemed both more complicated and more beautiful at once. The edges were sharper, the colors more vivid, and the quiet moments carried a resonance that I had never perceived before. I returned to the park occasionally to watch the world unfold, noticing the rhythm of human activity, the subtle conflicts, the moments of reconciliation and understanding. I saw children fall and rise again, their resilience reminding me of the inherent courage in all beings. I watched couples argue and reconcile, their movements a dance of emotions reflecting a deeper truth about connection. I observed strangers in fleeting encounters and felt the weight of their unseen battles, and I understood that each of us is a universe of experiences and emotions, each fight a chapter in a larger story of existence. I took the lesson into myself, the recognition that life is a series of openings and closings of the eyes, moments when clarity pierces the ordinary, when the hidden truths of human nature reveal themselves, and that the fight I had witnessed was a mirror reflecting both the pain and the beauty of life in all its forms. I began to carry that awareness into my relationships, being more patient, more attentive, more compassionate. The words I spoke, the gestures I made were informed by the understanding that every action can be a source of insight, every encounter a potential for growth, and every moment a chance to awaken. And I felt a sense of gratitude for the fight that had opened my eyes forever, for the rawness and authenticity of that struggle, for the way it had changed my perception, and for the subtle yet profound ways it continued to shape my life each day. The memory was a quiet guide, reminding me to see beyond appearances, to recognize the silent battles that shape us, to honor both my own struggles and those of others, and in doing so to live fully awake, alive, and aware to the endless complexity and wonder of being human. Final part of the story of the fight that opened my eyes forever. As the days passed and the memory of the fight lingered in my mind like a quiet echo that refused to fade, I began to understand that the moment had not only shown me something about others but had revealed something within myself, a part of me that had been been dormant, waiting to awaken, waiting to see the world with clarity and depth I had never known before. Every morning I found myself thinking about the two men, the exhaustion in their eyes, the shift in their expressions when anger gave way to recognition, and I realized that something powerful had happened, not just in them but in me too. The fight had stirred a truth that had been hidden beneath habits, routines, and the blindness of everyday life. I became more aware of my own reactions, the way I handled disappointment, the way I avoided certain emotions, the way I carried my own unspoken battles inside without acknowledging them, and slowly I started to confront them one by one. I sat alone in my room with the window open, letting the breeze carry in the sounds of life outside, the laughter, the arguments, the footsteps, the distant calls, and each sound reminded me that every person out there was living with their own struggles and victories, and that realization made my own battles feel less isolating. I remembered how the crowd had watched the fight in silence, not out of fear but out of recognition, a shared awareness that sometimes life erupts in unpredictable ways, exposing the raw truth of who we are and what we carry inside, and I wondered how many of those onlookers had walked away with their own lessons, their own reflections buried deep within their hearts. I thought again of the young man at the edge of the crowd, the one whose eyes had trembled with uncertainty, and I imagined how that moment must have shaped him, how it might have given him courage to face something in his own life, something he had been avoiding or fearing. I wished I could have spoken to him, asked him what he felt, what he saw, what changed inside him, but perhaps the silence between us was part of the lesson too, that sometimes the most profound understanding happens quietly without the need for words. As the weeks went by, I noticed small transformations in the way I lived. I no longer rushed through my days without noticing the world around me. I listened more deeply to people when they spoke. I found patience where before I had none. I forgave more easily, both myself and others. I breathed more gently, carrying myself with a calmness that had begun to grow inside me like a steady flame. I found myself returning to the park, often walking the same path where the fight had taken place, observing how peaceful it looked now, how the grass swayed softly in the wind, how sunlight filtered through the branches of the old oak tree. The scene was quiet but alive with memory, as if the land itself had absorbed the energy of that moment and transformed it into something healing. I would sit on a bench and let the memory replay in my mind, not as violence but as revelation, a reminder that clarity often emerges from chaos and that even the harshest moments carry lessons if we are willing to see them. I thought about fear and how often it holds us back, how it convinces us to avoid confrontation, to silence our truths, to hide our pain behind forced smiles and quiet pretenses, and I realized that witnessing the fight had shown me a different perspective, that facing fear, even in its rawest form, can lead to understanding, strength, and transformation. I began to reflect on the connections between people, the invisible threads that link our stories even when we do not know each other, the way one moment can change not only the lives of those involved but the lives of those who witness it, how change ripples outward, expanding, touching, shaping, evolving everything it passes through. I noticed myself becoming more honest with my feelings, acknowledging the sadness I buried, the anger I suppressed, the hope I feared to express, and in doing so I felt lighter, clearer, more present in my own life. I started journaling every night, capturing the chaos and beauty of my thoughts, letting them flow without judgment or restraint. Each word was a release, a small victory in the ongoing fight to understand myself and the world I lived in, and I felt grateful for the awakening that had begun on that morning in the park. I realized that life is not defined by the fights we win or lose, but by the lessons we draw from them, by the growth that emerges, by the awareness that dawns when we allow ourselves to truly see. I thought often about the two men in the fight, wondering what paths their lives had taken, whether they too had walked away changed, whether the moment had opened something in them as it had in me, whether they had found peace in the aftermath or whether their battles continued in quieter ways. The answers did not matter as much as the understanding that we are all more connected than we realize. Every fight, every struggle, every quiet moment of reflection contributes to a shared human experience, an evolving story of resilience and awakening. I felt a shift in the way I interacted with the world. I spoke kinder words, acted with more intention, offered presence instead of distraction, listened instead of assuming. I found myself becoming someone who sought to understand before judging, who offered compassion before criticism, who looked for meaning even in conflict, because I had seen firsthand how a single moment of raw honesty can change everything. I continued walking through life with this new awareness, a sense of clarity that expanded each day like a widening horizon, revealing more of the world and more of myself. I became less afraid of confrontation, understanding that facing truth even when painful is a doorway to growth, not destruction. I became more forgiving of my mistakes, recognizing that imperfection is part of the human story, that battles are not signs of weakness but opportunities opportunities for strength and learning. I found a calmness that I carried with me into every encounter, a gentle reminder that every person I met was fighting a battle I might never see, and that compassion was not just an act but a way of being. And in the quiet moments when I sat alone with my thoughts, I felt an enduring gratitude for the fight that had opened my eyes forever, for the rawness of that struggle, for the awakening it sparked, for the way it had transformed me from within, leaving me more aware, more alive, more connected to the world and to myself. And I knew that no matter where life led me, the lesson of that morning would remain a guiding light, a reminder that every fight carries meaning, every struggle holds truth, and every moment has the power to open our eyes if we choose to truly see.